This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And I just learned what our topic is going to be today, and it sounds like it's very fitting for most of us. And the topic actually is bringing intentionality to play. And Candace, it's funny because for the last couple of weeks, I've been writing about being intentional and, knowing, or at least trying to know where I am throughout the day. Um, and this weekend, I just totally threw it out the window.
And how did you manage the weekend then?
I was feeling very, very angry, didn't know why I was angry. And so the weekend just sort of I couldn't wait for it to be over. And then I woke up this morning and I realized what I had been doing for 48 hours. And my first reaction was to get mad at myself and say, oh, you're stupid, you should know better. But I didn't. It was like, okay, this is what I did. How do I ensure I don't replay this again?
And so having that insight does what?
I'm not sabotaging myself today. I'd sabotage myself for 2 days, but typically in the past, I would have then woken up this morning, realized it, and then gotten mad at myself and probably end up back in that same role.
Mm-hmm. So
Instead,
a series of things where you're kind of beating yourself up.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, I woke up and said, okay, that's what I did. Hey, I don't want to do that again. And I could see myself getting more motivated to be positive again.
And what does that do for you?
It takes a huge burden out of my backpack.
And can you tell me a little more about that?
It's like I don't have to carry around the responsibility of what I did. I just need to learn from it and move forward. And that was my thought pattern. Here I woke up, my husband had been up for about 10 minutes before me, and he looked at me and he said, good morning. And yesterday morning when he did that, I flew off the handle. It was like, and this morning it was like, hi, good morning. How are you? And as soon as I heard myself say that, I started like feeling good. Like I had maybe had the flu over the weekend and now the flu is gone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What stands out for me is you do the thing that we always talk about, which is just to notice. Notice that little fork in the road, and then you made a conscious, intentional decision.
Right.
And that it just really underscores how important just noticing is. It doesn't have to actually, you didn't have to change any of your behavior, but something changed.
Yes, exactly. Well, and my behavior changed.
That's what I mean. But
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's not, I mean, maybe you made a conscious decision, but just the noticing is a form of change,
yes,
where rather than just going like 5 laps on the hamster wheel with these thoughts and mood, or whatever, however we want to characterize it, to be able to say, okay, it's like I noticed I've done 5 laps, and then inevitably the decision is, am I going to do it another 5 or 1 or whatever it happens to be, or am I going to take that different path? And it sounded like you took that different path.
exactly. And in the past, I never, I'm not sure I knew exactly how to do it. I always thought that if there were these bad feelings over here, they just can't go. You can't just wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm not going to feel that anymore. But that's not what I did this morning. It was like, how can I not feel that way? And then taking the steps. And one of them was, responding positively to my husband. And that poor guy for the last 2 days had no idea what he had done wrong. And he finally even asked me last night, what did I do? And I just looked at him and I said, nothing, and don't ask again. Because
Don't
I
ask
did,
again if you know what's good for you.
yeah, yeah. And I didn't, it wasn't really him. It was something in me that triggered me over the weekend. So
I just really love that, Karen, because I came across the phrase in one of the programs I've been in, and the phrase is, how do I own this problem? You know, how did I create it for myself? And which is a form of noticing. And the other part that stands out for me that's just, popping into my head for no rhyme or reason that I can, consciously think of is I've known some people in my life that would ruminate about things, go back over things again and again that, can't be changed, totally out of their control, all of the elements of it happened, it's done, now we have choices going forward in the future, but they wouldn't let go of it. And when probed to say, what does this going back over do for you? The answer tended to be something in the neighborhood of, well, I want to understand why it happened. And we
yep,
can't always understand why, but we can be really intentional about just noticing that pattern. Again, that fork in the road, I'm just going to beat that metaphor
yep,
into a pulp, using it again and again. But it just that if I were a dog, my little tail would be wagging pretty wildly right now, just with that insight. I love it. So what do you know about play? What do you think play is? How would you recognize play?
So when I read the blurb this morning, I thought bringing intentionality to play is being aware of it, bringing it into your daily life in the things that you do. Because if I look back at this weekend, I could say in some ways I was intentionally being mean, but I wasn't. I wasn't even really aware of my actions. But then this morning, when I thought about it, or when it came to mind, it was like, I can intentionally have good feelings, but I have to think about it.
I love that. I love it. Love it. So when was the last time you played? Your idea of what play is?
Um, Actually, I've been doing it fairly well for the last couple of weeks. I put a number of things in play that typically make me mindful of it. Um, and so some people might look at that as work, but for me, it just takes a burden off of me. It's like, okay, when you get up in the morning, one of the first things that I need to do is, appreciate the day, look outside the window, even check the weather forecast and, oh yeah, it's cold, but you know what? It's one day closer to spring.
Mm.
Little things that can just like make me feel, mindful of things that make me happy.
Longer days,
Yep.
more daylight, the longer it seems, even though I guess it's relatively the same.
Right.
And then what does it feel like in your five senses, your body, and so on?
Um, it makes me feel healthy.
Interesting.
If I get up that way and start my day and continue down that path, being mindful. So for instance, up until last Friday, I've been suffering with a rotator cuff injury.
Mhm.
And yes, I wake up in the middle of the night, in the morning, and I'm in pain. But I was thinking about, okay, these are the different things I can do to relieve the pain. And that's wonderful. So I didn't concentrate on it being painful. It was how do I reduce it? But Friday, I got an injection and it basically has taken 95% of the pain away just from the
Mhm.
injection.
Mhm.
And now that I'm saying this out loud, I almost feel a loss of that pain. I'm
Uh,
glad it's not painful,
yeah, right.
but I've lived with it for almost a year. You know, it told me in the morning, hey, you didn't get a good night's sleep. It told me in the morning, this still hurts. Um, you know,
So it
little
was this
things.
nagging, like thorn in your paw kind of thing that was just always reminding you.
Yep, exactly. And I had no reminder of it this weekend.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know if that played into it or not, but uh, this morning when I woke up and I went to brush my hair, it was like, "Ah, my arm really is moving. Oh,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
isn't that great?" You know, I didn't think about the loss of the pain. I thought about, hey, this is wonderful. I'm using my arm. I can, I can put it up in the air. And last week I could not do this.
Yeah, I can see it. It
Yeah.
looks like it total range of motion. Great.
Yep. Yep.
So when these things come into play, no pun intended, in my mind, I like to not research them in the strict sense of the word, but explore them and get a better understanding of things. So I came across a great article um, on Scholarpedia. I think that's how you pronounce it. Yeah, Scholarpedia, which is, I guess, the Wikipedia version of scholarly studies and so on. And there's actually, excuse me, I'm going to clear my throat. Um, there are actually 5 elements of true play. All right.
Okay.
So play is self-chosen and self-directed. So it's first and foremost what you want to do, not necessarily an obligation. It
Okay.
might touch upon an obligation, it might serve that purpose and so on, but your basic intent is to play. Right. And it is intrinsically motivated for its own sake. So
Okay.
not necessarily for those other motives. And the idea is, even though there may be goals and other things involved in it and so on, it's inherently intended for I guess in my wording, the joy of it. And then it's guided by your own mental rules. And so, but that allow room for creativity. So they're not rigid. I have some rigid rules. Not that I intended them to become rigid rules, but I have, some of those things. And there's not necessarily joy involved with it, even though the end result is something I'm seeking. The doing of it isn't necessarily what I enjoy to do. Anything like that in your life?
Oh, a lot of things like that in my life. Um, I try to make time every day for at least one thing that I really like to do that is just for me. Um, but I also have found that I used to live by a lot of rigid rules, like, you've got to start working at XYZ in the morning and you're not going to leave your desk until, a certain time at lunch. But I'm not that way anymore. Um, I'm, I know there are things I have to do, but I'm more flexible on how I can do them. And typically that makes me um, more intentional about um, enjoying what I'm doing.
Yeah. So paying attention to it and actually enjoying it rather than, oh yeah, that was, not as onerous as, what I did between maybe 9 and 10 or something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And totally relate to that. And one of the other hallmarks of play, apparently to people who study these things, is that it's imaginative. And it basically is removing you in some level from the present world, the real world, so that our thoughts are basically free floating and probably more creative than they would be otherwise when we're hell bent on a task, for instance.
Okay.
So where does that show up in your life?
Um, Actually, it's been showing up more in my life in my writing. I used to set aside certain times of the day for me to write my blogs, to put together short videos. And that was becoming a task that many times I'd sit down and I would have no idea what I was even talking about. And now, even though I'm still doing the same amount of writing and presenting, I'm doing it when I have that feeling for it. And so I can let my imagination wander and come up with something rather than, okay, I'm going to write about intentionality now. Oh, I can't even think what that means. And then I keep running to the dictionary and scholarly articles. And then what I write means nothing, at least to me.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, and then the last hallmark, just to kind of bring it fully around, is it's even though we're letting go necessarily, or whatever the phrase is, of our sense of present time, we kind of lose ourselves in the activity, at least for a period of time. We're not necessarily watching the clock. We're playing in an alert but relatively non-stress frame of mind. So that basically is conscious control over our behavior, but with the means and rules and so on, requires the mind to be alert, but not, so it's not idle. It's not, channel surfing necessarily, it's having a sense that we're doing this because it's pleasurable. It's play for its own sake. And humans aren't the only ones that do it. And I just love this part that these 5 characteristics show up in other animals. And I don't know if you've seen, well, cats, and dogs and so on, they're play fighting. We have a lot of studio wrestling going on in my house with all the sound effects and so on. Sometimes furniture moving, I can hear upstairs or downstairs. It makes me wonder what is going on, but it's play. And because they keep doing it, there's no aggression to it. And so the idea is that playful actions in animals usually resemble serious actions in the same species. So, cats will play a certain way, dogs will play a certain way, but are conducted in a manner or in situations that make clear that the actions are not serving their usual serious instrumental purpose. So they give the example of a cat stalking prey. And there's a certain set of actions that's going to happen more quickly and more, intently, because when they see the prey, then they will, put their eyes on it and attack. But in play, the cat is doing actions that go on. They're not, they're not actually attacking anything. They're batting things around, and it isn't very efficient. It lets the mouse go each time. Could be a play mouse. It's not a real mouse, and so on. So we can be thinking of that when we're looking at our own play. And the reason this topic came up for me was I was doing this exercise that I do from time to time, which is tracking my time. Not that I'm, even though I'm a lawyer, I don't tend to do hourly billing, and I absolutely hate tracking time for that purpose. But it was for the purpose of seeing where my time goes and what was it serving my goals. And one of the things that became abundantly clear, so it was not, non-judgmental, pure discernment, looking at where my time goes, is that I didn't have a lot of play in it. I had things that I was thinking were not being at work, but they really were not that. They certainly weren't play.
Sure.
And so where does that show up for you?
Well, when I was working a 9-to-5 job, I tried to convince myself that my job was so much a part of my life. Like it was play, but it wasn't. Okay. I actually was miserable. And then I would bring it home with me. And when I first started working from home, it was the same way. Everything, was revolving around, the business here. How I had to do X amount of podcasts and writing and whatever. But in the last year, especially, and maybe it has to do with my accident last June, I've realized that I need to find time to walk away from the business and think about other things. And I have to do that very intentionally because I have a habit. I'll be in the grocery store and I'll see somebody and I'm watching their behavior and I'm thinking, boy, I bet you they have a lot to say. They'd be great on a podcast. Well, there goes my brain again. And so I'm constantly looking for other things to look at so it doesn't pull me back in.
Yeah, and I have the same issues, and I went through a particularly crushing amount of work from my day job, starting, probably in late September, October, all the way through the holidays and beyond, and which was one of the, precipitous things that made me start to explore this and to look at my time. And what I was calling play was a lesser form of work. It was
Yep.
like personal development and so on. And as much as I get joy from that and learning new ideas and making connections among ideas and so on, it just wasn't giving me that little high. Every once in a while, if I came across a connection with an idea or an insight, I would get, that little extra jolt of fun, but it wasn't rejuvenating. It wasn't
Right.
refreshing and so on. So what I did is I um, had fallen off the wagon in terms of some of my health exercises as well, because I was under this crushing amount of work. I was tired, I was exhausted, I was falling asleep almost as soon as I quit for the day, and so on, not good signs. So I started saying, well, I want to get back on my rowing machine. And I was listening to personal development things as if, okay, I can kill two birds with one stone. These are obligations,
Sure.
not at all the definition of play. But I switched it up and I said, I can listen to an audio book, but it has to be fiction.
Okay.
All right. And that was the only difference. So I paid attention. I noticed there was a fork in the road, several actually. And I made a choice and I switched up that one little element. And I have to tell you, I've had like 180-degree turnaround on my energy. So that even though the work continues to be pretty crushing, just because of the nature of my activities, my relationship to it has changed. So what stands out for you in that? Well, that might be useful for you.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up because I typically ride my stationary bike every night for anywhere from 25 to 50 minutes.
Mhm.
And while I'm riding it, I watch TV.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be anything special. It just has to be something that is slightly entertaining, whether it be, Jeopardy or something else. And when I do that, my day ends better and my next day starts better. However, I've been getting into this slump where, oh, I'm tired. I'm not going to ride the bike tonight.
Mhm.
And I went 3 days without riding it. And now that I'm saying this out loud, that probably had something to do with my thought pattern and behavior this weekend,
Mm.
because that typically will, get me on a high that you're taking care of yourself, you're having some downtime, and even though your downtime, you're working out, you're enjoying it. Okay. Now, if I were to go ride that bike without the TV or without a book or something else, it would not be enjoyable. And every minute would feel like torture. So that's how I've made it part of my uplifting. Okay, what am I going to do um, to enjoy this ride on the bike? And the same thing with my other exercises. Either there's got to be music playing that's going to keep me in beat with it, or there's going to be something interesting, uh, going on the TV in the background that I can be having my fun while working out.
Yeah, and if I can grab that, because that's exactly the point. It's the fun is the intrinsic behavior, and the working out part is, the time slot. So kind of stacking things, but it isn't the working out and then necessarily having the fun. Because what I noticed and what I think I heard you say is that um I started rowing longer because it's mind-numbingly boring stuff to do. All right. And I was constantly looking at the clock and saying, okay, I'm going to do 5 minutes. And, I was really stingy with that. And then if I broke my streak, I would beat myself up because this is what I said I wanted to do. I know I felt good, coming up with it as a goal, and I knew I felt good when it was over, but it wasn't refreshing in the way that that made me row longer. And so
Right.
when I had that rule that it had to be a fiction book, not a self-help book, um, I enjoyed it for the book part. And I got into the story, and, my brain was being filled with, somebody else's creativity, but it was stimulating my own.
Right.
And darn it all, didn't I row for 20 minutes without even no effort?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, and
And
my
then
husband,
I had a high all day, my
yeah.
endorphin high.
Well, my husband will laugh at me sometimes because usually when I ride the bike, he comes into the office, checks his email and stuff, and he'll come back into the room and he'll go, "You're still riding." And I'm feeling good, okay?
Yeah,
Whether
right.
I'm watching something on TV or I have this book in front of me, and I don't even realize I'm still riding the bike.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and and so I know I had a physical therapist who told me to work out this way many, many years ago. And I really thought she was crazy. It's like, no, it's still going to feel like a workout, but it doesn't. In the same way, when the weather gets nice and I start walking, I listen to music, but I listen to the music that I want. It's in my ears. Nobody else has to hear it.
Mhm.
And, I might say I'm only going out for a 15-minute walk. And an hour later, when I get home, it's like, where did the time go? So I got the best of both worlds. I got to listen to my music. I was outside and I was getting exercise.
Yeah, so this kind of comes around to Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, that Polish author and so on. He wrote Flow, and certainly a number of other things. And so he has the theory about flow. When we get into flow, so if you were to picture an axis, your typical L-shaped axis where the upward axis is challenges and the one along the bottom is skills. When we are in flow, we're somewhere where it's just a little beyond our skill level, but not so challenging that it kind of thwarts our sense of enjoyment. Because above that is anxiety, and below that, if we were to draw a line from the point of the L, outward, and figure out where we are relative to skills and anxiety, regarding these challenges and the skill set. Um, Boredom would be, probably at the lower triangle, and anxiety would be above the flow triangle. And so that's what occurred to me. It's like, oh, these were flow moments. And then that was a great fuel, or, foundation, whatever word. It just was an incidental outcome from intentionally playing.
Yep.
Maybe, not with any particular goal in mind other than for the pure enjoyment of it.
I love it.
So
Wow.
people can be thinking about where they may want to insert that, and remember the five rules, not the five, they're not rules, but the five markers of what constitutes play.
Absolutely. Well, being intentional and understanding what you're doing during the day, um, I know typically is something that I strive for. Um, but again, I have to tell all of our listeners, I used to beat myself up if I wasn't being intentional,
Mhm.
if I was, creating unlikable behavior for myself, but beating myself up would only extend it. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know,
Holding yourself while you're beating yourself up, right?
Exactly. Well, we will do this again in 2 weeks, and happy March. Feel
Longer day, warmer temperatures today, I understand.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. I promised my therapist that before I can't come to physical therapy today, that I was going to take a walk. So, that's my plan today.
Sounds
So
good.
hope
Enjoy.
you all have a good one.
All right,
Thank you.
take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.